Hello, I am the OBG, and tonight I'm going to be doing a little film review on the latest Frankenstein movie, which I did promise anyway. And I've gone a little in depth, but not too hard. And I have to do everything manually here. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so let's talk about the new Frankenstein film, right? Now, they don't really make them like they used to, as I say. But you know, we've seen lots of renditions, lots of redos, remakes, reimaginings, dragging old stories into modernity. And this time they're dragging this poor creature out of his grave for a brand new audience. And most of the time they get the heart of the story all wrong. And they tend to focus on the bolts and the lightning and they miss the real horror entirely. But I think this film did hit on the horror. So let me explain, okay? But before we get to the film, you have to understand the woman who started it all. Her name was Mary Shelley. Now, that's a wonderful mind. And she wrote the original novel when she was just 18 years old. Now, think about that. A teenage girl surrounded by the most celebrated poets of the age, her husband, Percy, Lord Byron, and she conjures a myth that would outlive everybody. Now, she was wrestling with the grief of a lost child, by the way, and living in the shadow of a mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, who herself was a revolutionary. And Mary Wollstonecraft, she actually wrote a vindication of the rights of women. And in it, she wasn't just arguing for education, she was launching a full-scale assault on the entire intellectual establishment of her time, which was a club for men by men. And she argued that men had created a system of reason and science that deliberately excluded women, labeling them as emotional and irrational, and to keep them out of the laboratories and the libraries. And the power to define what was counted as knowledge was itself a form of domination. She saw what they called natural philosophy, the original name for science, was often just a tool to enforce a very unnatural social order. And I hold a similar feeling about science and often met with a barrage of uneducated abuse, I guess. But Mary Shelley, she took her mother's argument and weaponized it through fiction. So think about Victor Frankenstein. He's the ultimate symbol of arrogance. You know, he's the male-driven scientist and he pursues knowledge without any conscience, any ethics, or any thought for the consequences. And he works in isolation, excluding community and particularly the domestic feminine world to create life alone. Now, it's the ultimate act of malcreation meant to bypass a natural maternal role. And this is one of the things that I talk about often again. A little thesis of mine that men can't create babies, so they've just been trying eternally to create life, and this is what AI is for them. And what is the result of this science? Divorce from care and responsibility, a monster. And it's not simply because the creature is born evil, but because he's born into a world where his creator refuses to nurture him. And if we're raised without love, we do indeed become monsters. And as the film shows, Victor's first response to his creation is revulsion and abandonment. He has the power to create life, but not the humanity to care for it. Now, it's society's brutal rejection of anyone who looks different that's brought to the forefront here. And the story is a devastating allegory. And it's about the pursuit of scientific glory without the balancing forces of empathy and ethics and what we might call a maternal sense of responsibility. And it leads to catastrophe. And this is one of the problems. And it's much like our world today, where the separation of the church and science turned scientists into madmen, and we've neglected the voice of women. And it's a warning that knowledge without wisdom is a weapon. The power to create is also the power to destroy. And when that power is exercised without any sense of connection to what is created, it unleashes a nightmare upon the world. Now, it would be remiss of me not to mention Boris Karloff here, because he made you feel sorry for the monster. And there's a famous scene in Boris Karloff's film with the little girl by the lake. Now, he isn't just a villain, he's a confused soul trying to play with tragic consequences. And Karloff understood the core of Shelley's story in that the real tragedy isn't the monster's appearance, but the world's brutal rejection of the monster. And he didn't play a monster, in fact, he also played an innocent, betrayed by his creator and cast out by a fearful society. And he done that very, very well. And his performance created an icon that has lasted a century, you know, the square-headed Frankenstein with the bolt. But it also cemented a misunderstanding in the public mind. His mute, childlike monster became Frankenstein, overshadowing the book's intelligent philosophical meaning. So Karloff actually gave us two things He gave us one of the most sympathetic performances in horror and an image so powerful that it almost erased the original. Now, this new film, it does something interesting. It's less about the gothic spectacle and more about the core relationship, that toxic bond between the creator and the created. Where the old films had the creature grunting, this one gives him a voice. And that's a crucial aspect. Sorry, my monitor's going to go off. I won't be able to see the meters. And I was impressed with Jacob Elordi's role as a monster. Now, Elordi's version seems to draw from a different source, and I think it's closer to the book. And this isn't like the groaning, shambling beast that we've become accustomed to. Elordi uses his physicality differently, and he's a towering, gaunt figure, more like a, sort of fallen angel, or the image we have of angels, than a stitched together brute. And the horror isn't in his appearance alone, but in the sharp, piercing intelligence behind his, behind his eyes. And I think that he also embodies the tragedy of a mind born awake into a body that marks him as a monster. If you can, imagine the performance hinging on the moment of creation, not confusion. But it's also a devastating, immediate awareness of his own isolation. And you can see that his rage isn't mindless, it's articulate, it's calculated. I mean, he pursues Frankenstein and pursues him. And I like this interpretation because it asks the audience a very hard question. What if the monster isn't stupid? What if the monster is smarter than his creator, more emotionally aware? And his only true crime is the face that he's given. Elordi's role then becomes a lesson in the brutality of prejudice. He's not a thing to be pitied from a distance. He's a mirror that forces us to confront why we always fear the other. Now, it borrows from Shelley's own structure, letting the creature tell his side of the story, just like in the book. You see the world through his eyes and you feel the injustice of it. And I think we all sided with the monster right from the beginning. Now, the film smartly uses modern visuals, not for flashy stuff, but for metaphor. For instance, the laboratory isn't full of crackling Jacob's ladders and steam. It's a cold, sterile place, all glass and metal, looking more like a tech startup than a castle, which I think is a very good allegory. And it makes you think, is this so different from the coded algorithms that we create today that drive the modern machinery that we've all become accustomed to and become dependent on? And we build these intelligent pieces of technology that shape our world, and then we wash our hands of the consequences. We abandon our own creations when they don't behave as we'd hope, and when they show us an ugly reflections of ourselves, we turn the other way. And the film asks the same question. The same questions that Mary Shelley asked, and that was like 200 years ago, when she said, what is our responsibility for the life we animate, whether it's made of flesh and blood, or flesh and bone, or from the code of computers or the steel structures that support them. And it's a question for many scientists, or for any scientist at all, and any engineer or any parent. You don't just get to walk away from what you've made. So is it worth your time? Yes, I'd say go and see it. It's a thoughtful, somber piece of work. It doesn't have all the answers, and it shouldn't, but it remembers the most important part of Mary Shelley's warning, that the true horror isn't the monster under the bed, but it's the one in the mirror, the one we refuse to show a little humanity. And I'll end by saying this. From the critics that I asked and tried to get some kind of feel for the film, the higher percentage of people that liked it, who I spoke with, were women, and those people have actually faced prejudice. Weird that, eh? I am the OBG.